She promised to come, but she didn't. The Secretary of State for DEFRA, Thérèse Coffey, was either stuck on an aeroplane in India, that's what her officials claimed, or too terrified of being booed off the stage of the Game Fair Theatre that she didn't turn up. So we no-platformed her in a countryside kind of way. I reckon she's scared because people at the 2023 Game Fair were very, very angry with DEFRA, which has been deliberately anti-countryside ever since she took over.
Up till now, there has been a general licence which allows shoots to release game birds everywhere. And the government, in the name of avian influenza, have introduced a provision that on sites of special interest, you have, if you're a shoot, to now get a licence, an individual licence. Now, you might think, well, that's a fairly minor thing. But I come from Norfolk, and on the whole of the battle area, and all the shoots around the battle area, they've all been asked to get a licence. That's 100,000 acres, and many of those shoots are being told, because I've had a case the other day, that they're not allowed to release game birds until the 1st of October. That shows how little Natural England and the government understand about shooting.
When it comes to the rural way of life, we've dropped, and I say we as in my colleagues who are ministers, I'll be blunt and honest about it, dropped a number of balls, the most recent one being the GL43 issue that isn't helping build trust with rural communities. It is an absurdity that we found ourselves in that place. It's an absurdity that we haven't fixed it already.
This is the third time in probably 4 years now that general licences in one form or another have been pulled by this government.
It's quite clear in the example of the GL43s that civil servants put together something in conjunction with Natural England, a plan, a flawed plan, a plan that the science didn't stack up, bounced it in front of a minister that isn't even really sitting on top of this area, whilst Richard Benyon, who was on holiday. And then we find ourselves some months down the line from that with a massive, great problem.
Promises from everybody, and I'm not going to tell you who, that this will be sorted, and it hasn't been sorted.
I can't be certain of this, but I would put a small wager on the civil servants and those that are advising ministers on this issue to almost certainly live in a city, probably have never lived in the countryside, have certainly never shot, have certainly never done the things that we all know actually exist out there and are a reality.
You and I and the whole of the audience of shooting people know that you order your birds, if you're going to put them down on shoot, the previous November and December for release in June. So they could have consulted the shooting community last November, last December about all of this, but they didn't. And what's more, not only did they not consult, they never consulted, and they never talked to the shooting community, all these shoots, and they suddenly introduced it.
So, Secretary of State, glad you could come. What are you going to do about it? Oh yes, of course, you didn't come. One of her opposite numbers from the Labour Party did come, so how to approach him? What should I be asking Daniel Zeichner?
What is his policy? What is the Labour Party policy at the next election going to be on shooting? Are they going to be supporting shooting?
Well, look, I think as you've seen in government, there are different views within government and within parties. My role, I'm the Shadow Food, Farming, Fisheries and Rural Affairs Minister. My role is to stand up for you and the people associated with the countryside.
Well, Daniel, to be fair, is a very bright chap. So he won't have come to an interview here with you without thinking about it very carefully. So don't let him get away with a wishy-washy answer. You want a definite yes or no. Is the Labour Party going to support shooting? Because then we can actually contrast what the Conservative Party, which will be supporting shooting, even with these difficulties that we're facing. The Conservative Party will definitely be supporting shooting, and that will be the contrast. And we want to see if that's going to be true or whether he's going to be supporting shooting.
Look, my personal view is the reason I come here for 3 years running is I've talked to and been briefed by excellent people from Basque who have explained the issues to me, and we will only intervene or act whether we see that there is a problem. And at the moment, I don't see there are problems that require reams and reams in manifestos about these issues. So we want the countryside to prosper and succeed, and we understand the role that shooting plays in the rural economy.
That's pretty good. Labour has not gone that far before. I go a step further. On trail hunting, one of the problems you've had there, your side has had there, has been you can't put a dog in the dock. You can't see what the intention of a dog is. How can you create a law that doesn't cross-examine the intention of the hunt?
Look, I understand your line of questioning, and I also understand why it's a very sensitive issue. But look, in the end, as democratic politicians, we have to respond to where the public is at on this. And I'm afraid I have to tell you that the public is not very keen on this. Now, equally, I'm not in the business of stopping people doing things which are illegal and they've done for a long time. So I'm quite happy to have a discussion around good regulation. Now, again, some of my colleagues will take a different view from me, but I'm happy to engage in that conversation. And I would just say that for those who are involved and concerned about this, and making sure that the rules are properly followed and obeyed and is good regulation could well be the way forward.
Well, he didn't promise not to ban trail hunting, but that's further than he went when I interviewed him in 2022 and 2021. I push it a bit further and ask him about trophy hunting. Where Boris Johnson wanted to ban the import of trophies and has so far failed, you want to ban the import and export of trophies while at the same time promoting deer stalking. Can we just talk about what you mean by that? Is it again the totemic idea of trophies?
Well, look, let me go back to right where I began with this, that the detail of legislation, we do not have the capacity in opposition to get into fine detail because quite simply we don't have the capacity. That is why we have civil servants.
Well, nobody was expecting a miracle. At least I get an answer, which is more than I get from Thérèse Coffey. We in the countryside are angry about that. Conservative MPs are angry about that.
I made a speech in the House of Commons last week where shoots are closing down, gamekeepers are being made redundant, the birds, what are they going to do with the birds? This is a catastrophic situation for some shoots. Ask her why this whole thing has got into such a muddle and what she can do to sort it out.
Look, I speak to Thérèse all the time. She's a colleague, she's Secretary of State for DEFRA, and I think what ministers need to hear is the strength of feeling from rural communities and from specific rural interests. That there needs to be that palpable sense of anger that there has been over GL43. There needs to be that palpable sense of anger that rural communities feel.
Yes, I'm a Conservative MP, but I'm going to say on this instance, it's incompetence to have got to this stage.
The chances are Thérèse Coffey will be out of a job soon and we won't miss her. She's turned DEFRA into the department for losing the rural vote and driving field sports to the wall. Let's hope that whoever comes next will be better. It might be Mark Spencer MP. Zach Goldsmith calls Mark Spencer the Bolsonaro of nature in England. If Zach doesn't like him, he must be good for the countryside. And you can watch all of those interviews in full on the Fieldsports Channel podcast. Links to those below.